from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. And welcome to the program. It is the Thursday night program. Believe it or not, I thought it was Friday almost all day. All day. Anyway, the phone number 833-482-5337, 833-4Valdez, or at Rich Valdez on all the social media. And of course, that is Valdez with an S at the end. Now, I want to jump into a lot of things. Of course, I think still the biggest story of the day is obviously the yesterday's whistleblowers. That's still the big story of what they were saying. That was really big. And yesterday I played a couple of clips of that, but there's a lot more clips that I didn't get into. So hopefully we'll get into that. I also want to shed some light on the hearings that happened in Washington today. And now, listen, I'm not guided by Washington's hearings, right? I mean, we do this show when when Congress is not in session. But was a big story where RFK Jr. testified today in front of the House Weaponization of Government Committee. And I think he did a really good job. He opened up with a very impassioned plea where he basically said, look, you're trying to censor a hearing on censorship. And he was 100% right because, of course, Democrats from yesterday night and early today were trying to disinvite him. We're adamant about not having him testify, saying, no, you know what? He is a crazy man. He is a anti-vax. He is an anti-Semite. He is, what else did they call him? A white supremacist. And he said anti-Asian comments. You know what he said about anti-Asian? He said that he felt that China had developed COVID-19 as a bioweapon against other countries. That was his Asian hate. Unbelievable. So anyway, one of the members of the committee, her name, and she's a former DNC chair, if I remember this correctly, when there was a bunch of drama back in the Obama time. But Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz, she's at a hearing today, the hearing where JFK was, and she tried to get the hearing to be conducted behind closed doors because she did not want the American people to hear Robert F. Kennedy Jr. saying that RFK Jr. needed to be censored in the name of blah, 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 which she cites in this clip. Listen to this.
I move that we move into executive session because Mr. Kennedy has repeatedly made despicable anti-Semitic and anti-Asian comments as recently as last week. Rule 11, Clause 2 says, whenever it is asserted by a member of the committee that the evidence or testimony at a hearing may tend to defame, degrade, or incriminate any person, or it is asserted by a witness that the evidence or testimony that the witness would give at a hearing may tend to defame, degrade, or incriminate the witness, and it goes on. Mr. Kennedy, among many other things, has said, I know a lot now about bioweapons. We put out hundreds of millions of dollars into ethnically targeted microbes. The Chinese have done the same thing. In fact, COVID-19, there is an argument that it is ethnically targeted. COVID-19 attacks certain races disproportionately. The races that are most immune to COVID-19 are...
The lady making a motion or a speech?
I've made a motion to move into executive session because Mr. Kennedy's testimony...
Mr. Chairman, I move to table the motion.
The
gentleman from Kentucky has moved to table.
Mr. Chairman, I ask for a roll call vote on the motion to table.
Now, of course, this roll call vote didn't result in anything, right? Because, of course, the Democrats are in the minority. There's a majority of Republicans. They voted. They were able to keep Mr. Kennedy in open session in the public hearing so that he could give his testimony. But it was just really interesting to see how the Democrats were adamant so that nobody would allow him to be heard. And I think that's funny. All I do is host a radio show, and I'm always eager to allow people that disagree with me onto the program. I always put them first before anybody else that has a comment. If you disagree, you always get moved to the front of the line. And I invite everybody constantly to call our number, 8334-VALDEZ, so that you can be heard. But that is not what the Democrats on this committee wanted. Now, what was it that Kennedy had to say? Well, listen to his impassioned opening remarks. Listen to this.
I was censored not just by the Democratic administration, I was censored by the Trump administration. I was the first person censored by as the chairman pointed out, by the Biden administration 2 days after it came into office. It ordered a truthful, and by the way, they had to invent a new word called malinformation to censor people like me. There was no misinformation on my Instagram account. Everything I put on that account was cited and sourced to peer-reviewed publications or government databases. Nobody has ever pointed to a single piece of misinformation that I publish. I was removed for something they called malinformation. Malinformation is information that is true, but is inconvenient to the government, that they don't want people to hear. And that's antithetical to the values of our country. After I announced my presidency, it became more difficult for people to censor me outright. So now I'm subject to this new form of censorship, which is called targeted propaganda, where people apply pejoratives like anti-vax. I've never been anti-vaccine, but everybody in this room probably believes that I have been, because that's the prevailing narrative. Anti-Semitism, racism, these are the most appalling, disgusting pejoratives, and they're applied to me to silence me, because people don't want me to have that conversation about the war, about groceries, about inflation, about the war on the middle class in this country that we need to be having.
So that's RFK Jr. Setting the record straight. And I got to tell you, I watched a lot of this. I was at the Newsmax studios doing a little bit of commentary on this and a couple of other topics. And I was in the green room watching. And I got to tell you, I thought he nailed it. He nailed it out of the park. Not that I liked what he said. I think he was effective in countering Miss Plaskett. And again, I know many of you may not like Miss Plaskett. I'm not saying that I like her. But Stacey Plaskett, in my opinion, is very effective at what she does. I feel that she is very convincing to people who may not be in the know. She comes across as authoritative. She comes across as knowledgeable. To me, she comes across as a little bit ill-spirited, but she's sharp and she's fast, and she can fool you. She really can. She can make you think that RFK Jr. is a anti-Asian, anti-vax conspiracy theorist that hates Jews, if you give her just a moment of your time. And it's a shame. Let me see if we don't have time to do Plaskett right now, but we will definitely get to her. And overall, this is part of the problem that we have in America today. I feel that the left has encroached on so many areas, right? So the reason they're able to do this in Congress is because their friends in the media will give them favorable coverage and make it look like they're fighting for you and me rather than fighting against the truth. Or even against lies. If you want to fight against lies, you got to let people say what they're going to say and then say, look, here's why what you said is wrong. You got to give people their chance to speak. This is why I invite people on this program to have that conversation. Some accept, some don't. But you have to allow people their due so that then you could say, all right, you know what? Let's take that apart. And you can't do that. But the left has encroached on many areas, public education, the media, higher education, unions, you name it. There's so many areas. And straight ahead, we're going to talk about how they were able to conquer all these areas. So don't miss that. Plus your calls, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
And thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And as we were discussing, whether it's the left within the media that are laying down the cover for their friends in Congress and elsewhere, or the left within academia, the left within the government, the left within everything, it seems like they're everywhere, right? It's like a disease that just won't go away. But that's where it is. And it didn't just happen overnight. It's been as our next guest puts it, it's been a cultural revolution. And the radical left has conquered everything. I think the big question is, how do we take it back? Christopher Rufo is the senior fellow and director of the Initiative on Critical Race Theory at the Manhattan Institute, and he's written this book. Excellent book. I recommend you getting a copy for yourself and one to give away. It's summertime. It's the best time to read, so get 2 copies. America's Cultural Revolution, How the Radical Left Conquered Everything. Christopher Rufo, welcome to the program.
It's great to be with you.
Yes, sir. So let's dig in, because I think it's a provocative title. I think a necessary conversation that we need to have as part of our national discourse, and it's just, honestly, we can't move forward unless we take back so much of what the radical left has conquered, which, as you've put it, is everything. So let's start off with why did you choose the namesake for your book?
Yeah, well, I think that it's important to understand really 2 key terms when you're thinking about the book's title. The first is a cultural revolution. And Marxists in the 20th century in the United States realized that they could not have the traditional Marxist revolution of mobilizing the working class and taking over the factories and then creating a revolutionary government. That didn't work in the Soviet Union, which became a tyranny, and it wasn't going to work in the United States, where most working class people were very happy with their standard of living, their government, their institutions. And so what they decided to do in the late 1960s and early 70s is what they called the long march through the institutions, meaning that they would take their revolutionary ideology, they would hide it, they would infiltrate the established institutions, governments, schools, universities, even corporations, and then bring their ideology from within those institutions and then conquer territory that way. And the goal, of course, was if you can change the culture, you can change the country. They thought you could change the culture first. And if they were able to do that, especially through education, they could finally, after 100 years, they believed, could have their Marxist revolution after all.
And really aptly put and rather succinct. But wasn't this always their plan? I mean, 100 years ago, I read that they were trying to, the hardcore communists were trying to take over teachers' unions. And to me, I would say they have succeeded. But it goes beyond that, doesn't it?
It does. And the kind of Marxist ideology went through a major change after World War II. And so what you're talking about is the traditional working class, organizing factory workers, organizing teachers' unions. But
right,
what
the
happened?
Proletariat versus the bourgeoisie.
Exactly. But that really fell apart after World War II. And so they created a new style of Marxist revolution, or you could call it a neo-Marxist revolution. And they had 2 categories that they believed could be most effective. They said the white intelligentsia, so college-educated, student radicals, college professors, and the black underclass, or the black lumpen proletariat, people who are at the margins of society, living in slums and inner cities. They believed that the intelligentsia could provide the ideology, and they believed that the black lumpen proletariat could provide the violence through rioting and other methods to successfully pressure the establishment. And what's really astonishing in researching this book is that theory that comes from the late 1960s is the same theory that was driving the Black Lives Matter, George Floyd revolutionary moment in 2020. Really nothing has changed. And so studying the history, studying the past gives you these incredible keys for unlocking exactly what's happening in our institutions. And then, of course, figuring out how to fight back.
I've seen some older, not 100-year-old, but 1970s, circa 70s, early 80s, communist writings on Marxist.org and whatnot, where they referred to Black Americans as the national minority, and wrote things in terms of recruitment of the national minority for different positions, whether it was political or union, saying to give them a position, whether or not they were qualified for it, just so that they would feel this air of superiority. And I found it to be very demeaning, but this was quite the strategy that they had devised in order to ingratiate themselves with this community. And it seems kind of like you said, nothing's really changed, right, from then till now, where it's still the communists trying to dupe people into their Marxist ideology to get them to do their bidding, to divide and conquer. And it's always the same end. Yet I'm shocked, I guess, or the incredulity you may sense, is that while we've seen this happen in history, it seems like we haven't really gleaned much from it.
That's right, and that's exactly the reason I wrote this book, is to give conservatives the kind of secret history of this movement and then to bring it to the present day. And, you know, the strategy hasn't changed, but what has changed is the conquest. And so in the 60s and 70s, all of the established institutions rejected this kind of ideology. They rejected the violent riots at the time. They rejected the terrorist organizations like Weather Underground and Black Panther Party. Even the New York Times, I went back as part of the research and I read the New York Times stories. They treated these left-wing radicals very poorly. They really insulted them and demeaned them, saying that they were trying to destroy important American institutions. They were using violence instead of peaceful protest. If you fast forward, though, 50 years in 2020, every company, every newspaper, every politician on the left, certainly, every CEO, every athlete, they all bent the knee to BLM. And so what has really happened is their strategy has finally yielded fruit. Their strategy has finally worked to move these institutions where people feel enormous pressure to conform to an ideology that had been utterly discredited in 50 years prior.
Yeah, and it seems like whether they're Maoists or Leninists or Stalinists, they have infiltrated the environmental movement. They've really expanded that. They've gotten into the racial grievance industry. They've gotten into just about everything, as you put it, and it's just fascinating to see it happening. And it's a great look at how you've described it in your book. So I want to continue to delve into that. And again, folks, I want to remind you, the book is America's Cultural Revolution: How the Radical Left Conquered Everything. The author, Christopher Rufo, senior fellow and director of the Initiative on Critical Race Theory at Manhattan Institute. And we're going to continue our conversation with him straight ahead. Chris Rufo, let everybody know in the 30 seconds that we have remaining where they can follow you and how they can get a copy of the book.
Absolutely. America's Cultural Revolution opened as the #1 national bestseller on Amazon earlier this week. It's the fastest selling conservative book in the country right now. And so you can pick up a copy at Amazon. You can pick up a copy at any retailer where books are sold. I think that we are building momentum for this book and certainly going to shape the national narrative for the months and years to come.
All right. Well, stick with us. I want to get into what your favorite part of it is and let the audience kind of take that apart as well. Folks, we're coming right back with Chris Rufo. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
And he's breaking it down. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Our conversation with Christopher Rufo continues, and the subject of our talk is his book. This is a book that you've got to get, America's Cultural Revolution: How the Radical Left Conquered Everything. Christopher Rufo, senior fellow and director of the Initiative on Critical Race Theory at Manhattan Institute. And Chris Rufo, the book is, we talked about it in broad strokes in the first segment. We know the problem. I think it's important that we start to kind of outline what a solution looks like, because as you've aptly put it, the left is re-engineering the human soul of our children and using them as guinea pigs. And this is a frightening statement to make, Chris Rufo.
Yeah, it's absolutely frightening, and but unfortunately, it's quite true. And this is the state of education politics in the United States today. The largest teachers union that oversees 3 million teachers in all 14,000 school districts recently put it to a vote of their members and decided that they were going to be pushing critical race theory in every school district in the country. The leading educational theorist in the United States, he's passed away, but his books are still enormously influential, is a man named Paulo Freire, who I profile in the book. He's a kind of unabashed Marxist theoretician. It's the most assigned book in teacher training programs. It's the third most cited book in all of American social sciences. And these are the kind of ideas that are training our teachers, and then they're bringing them to our kids in the classroom as young as kindergarten. In the book, I document dozens of examples of radical neo-Marxist curricula from all these school districts where they separate students by race. They make certain students feel guilty and ashamed for their ancestry, while rewarding and praising others merely because of how they were born and who their parents were. And so parents saw this, I think, in 2020, but it goes much deeper than I think many of them even know.
This is, again, very alarming because I feel, for I don't know, a decade or more, conservatives have been sounding the alarm on the media. Then they were sounding the alarm on higher education. Some have taken aim at the teachers union, the NEA, Randy Weingarten, et cetera. But I think it's, what hasn't been until, recently, Mark Levin, others have really just doubled down and said, this thing is everywhere, right? It's everywhere. And the only way you can really realize that it's everywhere is to be able to identify it. And I don't know that everybody is able to identify it because most people want to live their lives and they don't feel they need to be experts on identifying Marxism in everyday life in their American culture. But that seems to have dissipated and been replaced.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think that, I'm 38 years old, and when I went to public school, I think my parents probably never thought about it once, what kind of, if there was any possibility of a Marxist pedagogy in the classroom. It just simply wasn't part of the culture. But the culture in the last 25 years has shifted dramatically. The teaching core is very different. And I think that parents are waking up to this. They're really starting to seek options. And, I've been working on the last couple of years in many states to restrict critical race theory, restrict gender ideology, provide parents with more choices, providing even universal school choice vouchers so they can take their tax dollars to any educational opportunity of their choice. And this is what we have to do. We have to rebuild education from the ground up. And but first, you need to know what to look for. You need to know what might be in the classroom, and that's exactly the kind of information that I really highlight in the book through the whole education section. To show parents, wake up. There's something happening. You may not be able to identify it immediately, but if you get the information, you can start to dig into what's happening for your kids and then make the right decisions from there.
Do you believe that there is a way out of the mess that we're in without parents having to become activists?
I wish that there were, but I don't think at this point that that's a realistic option. Many conservative parents, unfortunately, I think have kind of let the institutions run, assuming that they're pretty high functioning. They might look to see what scores the local schools get on standardized tests or other measurements, but they have to start thinking about what the ideology is. And you don't need to actually be a political activist in the sense that you are, running for office or shouting at school board meetings, although that's great. But what you have to do is you have to be really mindful in the things that you devote your time and money to. And so find a religious school, a private school, a charter school, a home school. Find the best educational option for your kids, because education is the shaping of the soul. The radical left is right about that. The question is, who do you want to shape the souls of your kids, and towards which values should they be shaped? These are existential questions. They're the deepest questions. And I think that we're seeing perhaps the beginning of a revival in American education as parents start to grapple with these questions. But we need to ask these questions. We need to think seriously about answers, and we need to create alternatives.
The bottom line here is that this is a culture war, and if you're not a culture warrior, you're going to become a culture serf, right on the road to serfdom. Folks, we're coming right back with Christopher Rufo. Don't go anywhere. The phone number, if you want to join us that way and ask a question, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Our guest is Christopher Rufo, and we're talking about his book. You definitely want to get a couple of copies of this. I know that the economy's rough, and if you can't afford the book, then don't buy the book. But if you can, by all means, buy one. If you can, by all means, buy two. The title of the book, America's Cultural Revolution, How the Radical Left Conquered Everything. Now, before we resume and wrap up with Christopher Rufo, I want to go to Bob in Pittsburgh calling us on KDKA. Bob, welcome. You're on with Rich Valdez and Chris Rufo. Go right ahead.
Hi, how's it going? Thank you for taking my call. Look, this term, CRT, critical race theory, by the right, has been thrown around. And you know what? I'm not calling to start any arguments here or
just take a deep breath. You're stuttering a little bit. Just slow down. Say what you mean. Go ahead.
Sure, I'm sorry. Yeah, sure. I want to learn. Okay. So I am interested in knowing when you say, reorganizing the curriculum, and when it comes to CRT, what authors are we talking about? What books are we talking about? Who?
All right. Well, let's pause right there and go to Christopher Rufo so we could find out what authors and what books are being introduced into the curriculum that are radicalizing today's youth. Thank you, Bob. Go right ahead, Christopher Rufo.
That's a great question, Bob. And I would say that there's really two ways to look at this question. You could look at the original critical race theorists, people like Kimberly Crenshaw, who originated the theory in academia about 30 years ago and have been writing on these issues. But you can't stop there. You actually have to look at the ideas and concepts and arguments from CRT that are embedded in the curriculum in all sorts of ways. And so even math can have elements of critical race theory, which sounds implausible. But in the city of Seattle, for example, they've hired a full-time critical race theorist in their administration, and they're pioneering what they call ethno-mathematics, basically racializing mathematics, having all of the mathematical problems and equations be applied to radical left-wing racial theory. And so there's really no discipline that is safe. I wish I could say, hey, here are 3 books to watch out for. But it's embedded at the pedagogical level, meaning that it's embedded in the way people teach, not just what people teach. And so if you have kids in school, Bob, just make sure to review what they're doing and to talk to their teachers. And if your instincts say, something's seems wrong here, follow up, dig in, figure out what's going on.
Now, Christopher Rufo, just as a follow-up to that, I think it's important that there's what you're mentioning, concepts and ideas that are everywhere. But this is one more area where I think parents need to understand what this discipline is all about, from Derek Bell straight through, so that people understand what they're looking for, and this way they can identify it. Because this is really one of those cultural battles where it's about what you know, right? And the more you know, the more successful you'll be. So is there a book, maybe a previous book that you've written in addition to the work that you're currently promoting that you want to share that might talk about critical race theory in particular?
Yeah, I've written a number of policy papers and articles, but really it's this new book, America's Cultural Revolution, which debuted this week at the number one bestseller on Amazon. There's an entire section with 3 or 4 full-length chapters just devoted to critical race theory. And so you'll get the history of CRT, you'll get how it's embedded in the curriculum, you'll understand exactly where it wants to take society. And so you'll have everything that you need to know to feel more knowledgeable than 99.9% of everyone else in the country on CRT just by reading the last section of the book.
Now, and that's fantastic. Now, for folks that feel, you know what, I'm up to speed with CRT, I'm terrific. What else can they expect to glean from this book?
They're going to get the whole arc and the whole history of the left's cultural revolution and long march through the institutions, to not just understand it at an ideological level. Okay, maybe you understand CRT, maybe you've read a little bit about it, you understand what the ideas are, but you have to know how they took these ideas and put them into the institutions, and took these institutions and then used them to express their power, to express their revolution through all of these different organs of society. And so it's not just about theory, it's about political practice. It's not just about ideas, it's about institutions. And so it's a really comprehensive look from the 1960s to the present. You'll understand the large sweep in American history. This is going to shape the presidential campaign this year. I know, having worked with Governor Ron DeSantis and supporting his campaign for presidency, he understands all of these ideas, all of these concepts. President Donald Trump, of course, I worked with him on CRT as well. He's all in on these ideas. And so if you want to be ahead of the game, if you want to know where the candidates are going next, pick up a copy of the book.
Folks, get 2 copies of the book. Trust me. America's Cultural Revolution, How the Radical Left Conquered Everything. Christopher Rufo, let everybody know your website, your social media handle, how they could follow you, and keep up to speed with the great work you're doing.
Thank you so much. Get me on Twitter at RealChrisRufo, RealChris, R-U-F-O. My Substack is Rufo, rufo.substack.com, and then Amazon.com, America's Cultural Revolution, or wherever books are sold.
Keep up the good work, my man. Really, really, I'm happy to see that there's a book out there like this one that's kind of all-encompassing, getting people up to speed and giving them a plan on how they can fight back in the Cultural Revolution. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
You bet. Folks, your calls and more straight ahead. The phone number, 833-482-5337.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
And you testified that he said that Hunter told his dad, according to Rob Walker, quote, "I may be trying to start a company or try to do something with these guys." Now, let me ask you something. That doesn't sound much like Joe Biden was involved in whatever Hunter Biden was doing with the CEFC if Hunter Biden is telling him that he's trying to do business with them, does it?
No, but it does show that he told his father he was trying to do business, and he was
okay. Well, that is true. Hunter Biden does try to do business. That's correct. Yes. So you not only have no direct evidence connecting Joe Biden to any of Hunter Biden's business deal, you actually had proof that he wasn't involved. That is the proof that you had.
It actually seems like he just said that. It shows that he was telling his father he was trying to do business. So again, if I tell my dad, hey, look, I'm cutting a deal with these guys, we're doing X, Y, and Z, and then my dad famously goes and says, I don't talk to my son about his business dealings, well, then somebody here's lying. And the witness is making it clear that the liar is Joe Biden. Hunter Biden never said that he never talked to his dad about anything. It was Joe Biden who said, I don't talk to Hunter about any of his business dealings. And if we can remember that, right? I mean, Trumpet Daily's put together this little montage of Joe Biden saying he's never discussed business dealings with his son, Hunter. Listen to this.
First of all, I have never discussed with my son or my brother or anyone else anything having to do with their businesses, period.
How many times have you ever spoken to your son about his overseas business dealings?
I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings.
Do you stand by your statement that you did not discuss any of your son's overseas business?
Yes, I stand by that statement. No, I don't discuss business with my son. I never discussed a single thing with my son about anything having to do with Ukraine. No one has indicated I have. We've always kept everything separate.
And I've never discussed what my son's business with him because I didn't want any conflict.
I don't know what he was doing. I know he was on the board. I found out he was on the board after he was on the board, and that was it. My son's business dealings were not anything with everybody that he's talking about, not even remotely, number one. Nothing to do with me.
There you go. So that's Joe Biden. I got hairy legs, by the way. And if you think I talked to my son about his business dealings, well, you ain't black, right? I mean, he says the craziest things. Anyway, good old Joe Biden. Seems to me that he's doubled down, tripled down, quadrupled down, that he doesn't talk about it. But now we have a witness saying that that actually happened. Why? Because they've uncovered emails. And in the emails, Hunter's saying, my dad's sitting next to me. I'm waiting for your call. Right? This is happening over and over. It sounds like a shakedown. It sounds like extortion. But this is exactly what's happening. And so many people are willing to turn a blind eye. And it's a willful blind eye. And listen, this happens on both sides, right? I have to be frank, right? Some people come and they try to make a good point about, let's say, a Republican candidate that you might like. And many people are willing to turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to ignore things that may be a topic of concern, things that we should be talking about, we're not talking about. And I think that this style of being a political observer where my guy's always right and your guy's always wrong, it's obviously not it's not productive, right? We never really get anywhere because you can't get to a place where you can work with somebody with that. So I think it's important for us to remain, to have a critical eye towards people. And listen, I like so many Republican candidates. And if there's a flaw, sure, of course there's a flaw. I see it and I'll acknowledge it and I'll keep moving because I think you've got to put things on a scale. And you've got to say, well, this guy, I may not like this or I may not like that, or some people may not like this or others may not like that. For me, a lot of those things are insignificant. When I vote for president, I'm not voting for pastor or for priest. I know exactly what I'm looking for. I already have a pastor or a priest, right? I go to church for that. I don't need this person. I'm not looking for an immoral person, but I'm not looking for somebody that is, if they were divorced 3 times, that's okay for me. It really is. I'll still vote for them. Bottom line here is we have to be able to call it out. And we can't call anything out if people won't be honest. And if Joe Biden can't acknowledge that he's given his son some business advice, because, that makes all the sense in the world that you would, right? You're a smart guy. You're his dad. I'd go to my dad for business advice. Why is it that Hunter never went to his? It smells bad to me. Anyway, folks, we're going to continue our conversation straight ahead. 833-4-VALDEZ. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. And that's Valdez with an S, by the way. Your liberty-loving Latino amigo, happy to be here with you. It's Thursday night, hour number 2 of our broadcast. Feel free to give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And a couple of quick headlines here. Yesterday, there was these explosive revelations that came out of the hearings on Capitol Hill with respect to the IRS whistleblowers. And, you know, the Democrats were, I think, put on defense there because the star witness, Mr. Ziegler, was a gay Democrat by his admission. He said, you know, you may find it odd that I'm here because I am a Democrat and I'm married to a man. And, you know, I think it was not just theatrics. He was trying to set the stage and saying, look, anybody can realize that this is wrong. And I may happen to be anybody, right? And it was just, I thought it was a very effective presentation. Really, the testimony, very effective. But yet, here we are a day later and nada, right? Other than, you know, some of my colleagues in talk radio and maybe Newsmax and Fox News, our good friends at Breitbart, but you're not hearing and seeing much about this. And that's because those that get all these clicks like CNN, MSNBC, they are silent. And that doesn't surprise me. Censorship runs in deep in the veins of so many individuals. Just like today, right? Today, RFK Jr. was on Capitol Hill. He was trying to testify, and he did testify. But that wasn't without any attempt from the Democrats to silence him, saying that he was a white supremacist, that he was single-handedly taking on and bullying the tech and media companies. This is what Representative Plaskett said. Thought it was insane. We'll get to that a little bit later. But that's what it is. And our enemies do a good enough job attacking us from abroad, whether it's cyber attacks or these cultural attacks like, you know, buying off our politicians and getting them to act the fool. And speaking of foreign attacks, you'll probably remember about a month ago, there was an acknowledgement from our government, the federal government, saying that several agencies were hacked as part of a broader cyber attack. Then we learned that there were some vulnerabilities in email, and it's disappointing, but it's concerning as well. And I want to get into that because I feel like there are foreign enemies out there, like China, Russia, Iran, others, that are just chomping at the bit, waiting to eat our lunch. And when we, whether intentionally or unintentionally, don't do what we have to do to protect our critical infrastructure and our cyber stuff, then shame on us, right? We're going to continue to get hacked. Well, that's why I wanted to have a conversation about this, because this is a topic, a piece I read in the Post, collateral spammage. Typo redirects millions of Pentagon emails to Mali. I see this and I think this seems orchestrated, but what do I know? That's why I wanted to talk with the tech editor from Breitbart News tech editor Allum Bokhari. He's terrific. He also wrote an excellent book about a year ago, and I recommend you pick up a copy if you haven't. Deleted. Excellent book about big tech. Now, Allum Bokhari, I believe, is with us. Allum Bokhari, welcome.
Good evening, Rich. Good to be on.
Likewise, brother. Good to be with you. I always appreciate your opinions on these news items. And is this something that I should be making, should I get my knickers in a bunch here? Or is this par for the course? Do we always send millions of Pentagon emails to Mali?
Well, I think the underlying story is the incompetence at work here. I think some people still have the misconception that the deep state, especially the military side of the deep state, is staffed by these geniuses who are able to pull off massive conspiracies. But actually, much like the broader bureaucracy, it's much more like Veep than it is House of Cards. If you're a smart young guy, you're probably not going to go and work for the government. You're probably going to go work for Silicon Valley. So it totally doesn't surprise me that people were accidentally sending emails to Mali to .ml instead of .mil. And it's kind of amazing that they didn't just build a simple program to stop that from happening, to warn people that, hey, you've missed the letter. You're sending this to a foreign country. It's pretty easy fix to do if you have people who are, even just a little bit talented, have just a little bit of skills, in a technical sense. This is why it's been so easy for big tech companies like Google's Eric Schmidt in particular to come into Washington and immediately win huge Pentagon contracts, because there's such a dearth of technical expertise in Washington. Everything's behind the times, and Silicon Valley can essentially gobble up everything. And that was a big thing under Obama, when Obama was the one who named Eric Schmidt as an advisor to the Pentagon, and it kind of tapered off a little bit under Trump, because a lot of the big tech guys didn't want to be seen working with Trump. But it's definitely a trend of the past 2 decades.
Allum Bokhari, this is so disconcerting, because you've got, like you've pointed out, you've got the Obama officials, intermingling with Google folks, and you had the Biden people all over Twitter, and it makes you think that there isn't really, and again, I understand people leave government and go into the private sector and vice versa, but it seems like an incestuous relationship.
It also seems pretty one-sided. I mean,
right.
One of the subtexts of the Twitter files is that, the government just, it doesn't have it's kind of like a good thing. They don't really have the power to censor Americans. They don't really have the power to control the narrative. They used to just be able to, talk to their friends in the media if they wanted to shut down a story or, prevent Americans from seeing something. Now they have to talk to these Silicon Valley companies. And in many cases, even the left-wing members of the Silicon Valley companies, like Twitter's Yoel Roth, will push back and say, well, hey, actually, these are not. You see this in the leaked emails. He'll be saying, well, no, these are not Russian bots. They're American journalists and activists. So, yes, the deep state uses Silicon Valley for its own purposes, but even the left-wingers in Silicon Valley seem a little bit more independent and a little less co-opted by the deep state than the traditional media.
Unbelievable. So we have real deep state threats. Then we have these threats that come by happenstance when that are going back a decade, right? I'm seeing here that these typos, the Mali and .mil.ml, this stuff has been going on for 10 years, and the folks that ran the servers for Mali, they've announced it to the Pentagon on multiple occasions and warned them, and nothing happened. And it's crazy to see how you have this just lopsided relationship with big tech, and they still can't get it right. Folks, we're on with Allum Bokhari, and we're going to continue our conversation. He's got an excellent piece in Breitbart on how consumer groups are pressuring Congress to stop car companies from spying on Americans. And I got to tell you, there's a lot of gadgets in my car, and I always feel like, like that old song. I always feel like somebody's watching me whenever I get in my car. It even gives me a warning, like if I don't look out at the infotainment console, or if I'm wearing darker sunglasses than I normally wear, it'll say, please keep your eyes on the road. And I'm like, how do you know I'm not looking at the road? Man, I hate that stuff. Anyway, folks, we're going to continue with Allum Bokhari from Breitbart News. He's the tech editor there. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. No hair, no care, and live on the air, it's Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Our guest is Allum Bokhari. He is a writer with Breitbart News, specializing in the tech sector, and he's got an excellent piece that I recommend you check out, and give him a follow on social media as well so you don't miss his stuff. It's exclusive. Listen to this. Consumer groups are pressuring Congress to stop car companies from spying on Americans. And I think this is concerning. Allum Bokhari, tell us all about it.
Yeah, I mean, we don't realize how much data cars, especially newer cars, collect on us. We think of the big data collecting companies as being Facebook and Google, but another big one was Uber. Uber infamously had a God mode option that the early CEOs would just dip into to look at people's interesting Uber trips. So, there's a lot of data that cars can collect on you. And there's currently a battle going on whether the car manufacturers hold on to that or whether the tech companies get a hold of it. And the tech companies are trying to get a hold of it. So that's essentially the core of this story. Who is going to own that data going forward?
Recently, I don't know if I read it or saw it, or maybe it was YouTube, who knows. But I'd read something about these sensors that were equipped in routers that allowed, they didn't have cameras, but they knew if people were in the room and kind of like the movement, and it used that to predict how people were moving. And I understand smart speakers do the same thing without like technically spying on you. Is this type of technology that I'm describing something that our cars are also equipped with, Allum Bokhari?
I don't know about that. It's certainly entirely possible that story you mentioned about the routers, I saw that too. They can indeed detect whoever is in a room. There's also all other kinds of devices that collect way more data than you'd think. There was a big scandal, I remember a while back. I think it was smart home devices that were collecting, huge chunks of conversation and then sending it to human operators so that they could train the AIs to recognize certain words and certain tones of voice. But they were like sending way more. They were supposed to be like breaking up the sentences and the conversations, but they were actually just allowing random employees to listen on entire conversations going on in private homes. So there's like so many devices that we're surrounded with at all times, and they're always collecting data.
So now this piece, to me, I find it alarming because I'm thinking, it's good on these consumer groups to pressure Congress to stop car companies from spying on Americans, because I think oftentimes if somebody's not looking out, and again, I don't know much about this. I read an article here and there from Allum Bokhari, and I'm like, hey, I'm smart now, right? You're the one that knows this stuff, and there's not a ton of guys like you out there that really are up to speed on this. What do you recommend, other than reading your column, which I think is a great idea? But what do you recommend to people who might be sitting in the middle of lots of vulnerability when it comes to their technology to stay safe?
I mean, that's a great question. It's almost impossible to escape these days. I certainly know people who don't get smart TVs. They get older, dumb TVs, but those are getting harder to find. So we're certainly moving towards.
Why? Do they spy on us too?
Smart TVs? Oh, yeah. I mean, of course, smart TVs are constantly sending data back to the tech companies so they know what you're watching, we know what to recommend, but they're also, potentially if they're activated by voice, they're collecting your voice data as well, which can be a bit more invasive. I think the way forward is, these technologies aren't going anywhere. So the way forward is clear standards about what companies can collect and what they can do with it. And we're kind of in a Wild West scenario right now where those standards don't quite exist, and Congress hasn't really caught up to regulating all these new technologies.
Yeah, it sounds like the same conundrum they face with AI. They don't know how to regulate it because they feel like they have existing statutes on spying or on intellectual property or whatever and what have you. But it seems like a whole new bastion, the world of AI, just as the world of data collection seems to be.
And they also end up falling into political traps by getting obsessed with the wrong problem, an unimportant problem, or a problem that doesn't exist. So with AI, you have the Democrats, including the FTC, making much too much of research from the field known as machine learning fairness, which is essentially just critical race theory plus computer science, trying to make AI algorithms fairer and serve very ideological goals of racial justice as opposed to actually accurately analyzing data. Because if you just have an AI that accurately analyzes data, then that's not going to necessarily serve ideological goals, because sometimes ideology is at odds with the data. And certainly I see the Democrats falling into the trap where they obsess over what the machine learning fairness academics are telling them and not actually over real issues with AI that everyone should be concerned by.
Yeah, that makes sense. And as you're writing about, the spying on people through cars or other tech, there's still an issue of the government, right? Where, recently, we as recent as today, we've seen the House Committee on Weaponization trying to censor RFK Jr. on his censorship, right? He was talking about how he was censored, and they were trying to censor him from being able to talk about his censorship. And we've also seen it come out of the National Defense Authorization Act becoming fertile ground for censorship as well. And I think and this is something you've written about, and I think it's an interesting point on how they wrap it in safety and security, and people think, well, we need that, but ultimately it's a Trojan horse for more control on free speech.
Indeed, and national security as well. I mean, the NDAA, the latest reports are Mark Warner, I think it is, and this is somewhat unconfirmed. He's trying again to get his Restrict Act into the NDAA, and the Restrict Act, if you remember, was the so-called TikTok ban bill that actually did far more. It did far more than simply ban TikTok. It was essentially the Patriot Act 2.0, just extraordinary draconian punishments for Americans that violated. I believe it was State Department that would be allowed to say, well, certain websites are sanctioned, you can't go to them, and if you use a VPN to go to them, we'll put you in jail, we'll do all sorts of, we'll fine you. It was extraordinary. It was like an American great firewall, like using Chinese tactics to beat the Chinese.
Ah, terrible.
Or becoming China to defeat China, rather.
Yeah, I want to make sure before we wrap up that you let everybody know how they could find you. Why don't you tell everybody if you have a website or if you wanted to go to Breitbart.com, the best place to find what you're doing?
Sure, you can always find my articles on Breitbart.com. You can buy my book on Amazon. It's called Deleted, Big Tech's Battle to Erase the Trump Movement and Steal the Election. And my Twitter handle is @Allum Bokhari.
Allum Bokhari, always a pleasure, always enlightening. I appreciate you staying up late to be with us live. All right,
Rich,
my
good
brother.
To be on.
Yes, sir. And we're going to continue with your calls and more straight ahead. 833-4-VALDEZ, 833-482-5337. Don't go anywhere.
Rich Valdez, who again will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to it.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So everybody's talking about Barbie, the Barbie movie, all sorts of Barbie this and Barbie that. And I'm looking at an article in the New York Post that says, I can turn you into a plastic $120,000 Barbie doll, private parts included. And, of course, they're talking about plastic surgery to look like the doll, right? The Barbie doll. And, of course, lots of controversy on this, whether it's promoting wokeism or not. And I can say in my lifetime, I think Barbie's always promoted commercialism, right? It was always another tool to just sell more stuff. And it was never really like Hollywood even. You know, Hollywood at least was art imitating life. Barbie wasn't really art imitating life. Barbie was creating the idea that you wanted, and people were following this idea that wasn't really life. And, you know, so I find it interesting that there's all this critique on Barbie now saying that, she's this and she's that, and the movie's this and that. And I'm thinking, that's what Barbie's always been. It's always been fake, phony, and fraud. It's Fantasyland. It's a doll. But anyway, the story here is about people getting plastic surgery. And I thought that was interesting. And it really focuses on our society and how people really have an obsession with youthfulness. And I get it. I do understand it. I don't really aspire to have like the beard that my dad had, right? I mean, before he died, my dad had like a literally white beard like Santa. That was cool. But, the 20 years it took him through salt and pepper to get there, I'll pass. I'll stick with the darker beard. It looks better. You look more youthful. I mean, I think everybody's at their best at some point, I don't know, 30s, 40s, where you're really at your best shape. Maybe it's in your 20s. And of course, that's why people want to stay young and feel young and hold on to that. But with us to discuss America's obsession with youthfulness is board-certified plastic surgeon. He's also the host of a weekly show called Nip Talk, which I think is really cool. Welcome back, Dr. Bruce Hermann.
Hey, thank you so much for having me back.
You bet. So let's dig into this a little bit because
let's do it.
I was reading on this, and it says, TikTok's latest aging effect reel is revealing America's obsession with youth. Culture's been obsessed with youth for generations, but these days, teens and 20-somethings are getting Botox before the first hint of a wrinkle. And I think that's crazy. I've also seen a lot of like lip injections and this and that. And I don't know if it's if that's laden with side effects or not, but I just can't imagine it's great for you, Dr. Hermann.
Sure. So, yeah, there was a big trend on social media in the past few weeks with that aging filter, and Kylie Jenner kind of set it off. She's got so many followers on social media, and so she did it to herself. And, she's 25 years old, obviously very, very good looking. And so she did it and made her look like she was probably in her 50s, and she still looked good. But she, obviously being 25, had a somewhat negative reaction to seeing herself at that potential age. And so there was all of this talk that came up of, people realizing that they're going to get older, and people are attracted to things that they're afraid of, and Americans are afraid of looking older. And so there was a lot of talk in the past few weeks about younger people seeking out plastic surgery, which is not a new trend. It's something that we've seen, over the past few years, that Generation Z is into plastic surgery and youthful procedures.
Now, let's talk about that. Because, I think the last time we spoke about the dangers of going to, like, Colombia or Mexico or any foreign place, right, to get a BBL, tourism. Right, the Brazilian butt lift. And obviously, I think a lot of young people do that.
Yeah, that is one of those trends in plastic surgery that I certainly am not a big fan of. And I know we talked about that last time. The Brazilian butt lift, I think, will be not as popular in the years to come. But as far as younger people seeking out procedures, as always, I'm kind of in the middle on this one. I always use my wife as an example. I know she hates that, but my wife started getting Botox when she was about 30, about the time that I started in plastic surgery. And now we're
just to ask, is that the right time to start getting Botox? 30?
Well, it's not a bad time to start it. It's very common for women in their late 20s or 30s to start Botox, because what Botox does, if you use it before you have wrinkles, you never get the wrinkles. And if you saw my wife, who's been getting Botox now for 18 years, you would never think that she's her age, because the frown lines that she would have gotten over the years have never materialized because Botox has prevented it. And in that case, Botox is a nice way to prevent aging, because those wrinkles on the face are one of the first things that make us look older.
Now, and since we're on the topic, for anybody who's not familiar, and I'm no expert, but I know that this is was some sort of toxin that was created for something else and was discovered to stop like the muscles from tensing so much. Is that how it works?
That's exactly right. So it's botulism toxin, which is actually a very deadly toxin. However, it's only deadly if it gets into your bloodstream, and used in the manner that we use it for, to paralyze superficial muscles. It's completely safe. There's never been a case of fatality from using Botox in the face to eliminate wrinkles. So yeah, it paralyzes the muscles. It lasts on order of 3 to 6 months, depending on how frequently you get it. It has a very safe risk profile. And the only thing is it does cost a little bit of money to get a full set of Botox in the forehead, in the area between the eyebrows and the eyes. It's going to run you in the ballpark of about $500, give or take, depending on where you live.
All right, so you get $500, and then that's $500 every 6 months, or $500 a year, or how does that work?
Yeah, if you want to use it regularly, you probably should do it a couple times a year. And of course, there's no absolute need for it. I mean, the more you use it, the better it works. But yeah, if you want it to be effective full time, which people do, I'll tell you, Botox is one of those things that about 99% of people just love. And I do it on people who've never had it, and they say, I can't live without it. I got to come back. And so fortunately, it's pretty harmless. There's, the only thing that really you're out is just the cost of it. There's no big risk associated with it. So yeah, it's one of those things that people start using young or even later in life, and they really do like it because it does make people look younger.
Interesting. Now, my thought on this is do you find the demand for Botox increasing because people are like, all right, I got it and it didn't do anything bad and it was safe? Or is it because people are getting older faster because times are rough and they want to hold on to their youthfulness?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons that things like Botox are increasing in popularity. The pandemic was a big one, and I think we may have talked about this in the last time we were together about the Zoom effect, where during the pandemic, people were working from home, and what would they do? They were getting on Zoom, and they were seeing pictures of themselves constantly on the computer, and they were noticing
they were like TV people all of a
things.
sudden.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. That also in the rise of TikTok, where people are doing a lot of videos that are kind of a one-on-one view of their face. People are either making the videos or they're seeing other people who are making videos and are noticing these signs of aging or youthfulness. So yeah, there's actually a lot of reasons that Botox is increasing popularity. And as I said, it's a pretty safe procedure. It's very effective. And so it's not surprising that every year we see an increased rate of Botox, both in women and men, actually. There's every year a little bit more men get Botox than the year before.
Now, I've read articles that say that Botox has other benefits or features, I'll use the word features, beyond paralyzing muscles so that you don't frown so much and get these crow's feet or forehead lines or whatever lines. But also to prevent hyperhidrosis and other things like that. What can you tell us about that?
Sure. Well, one of the effects that I see in my patients is that it's very effective at reducing headaches. And so if you are a person that suffers from chronic headaches or even migraine headaches, all of my patients who suffer from that and get Botox will tell me that they get less headaches, which is a nice side effect of this drug. In fact, my wife, who I always use an example, will tell me, I know my Botox is starting to wear off because my headaches are starting to come back. As you said, hyperhidrosis is a common use for Botox. The only downside to that is the amount of Botox that you need to effectively treat an area for excessive sweating. Sorry, I said hyperhidrosis. So for your listeners, that's excessive sweating, whether it be in the armpits or the palms. It takes quite a bit of Botox, so oftentimes you're looking at maybe $1,000 worth of Botox to get that effect for the sweating. And unfortunately, insurance is not great about paying for that, so it's kind of a fairly significant out-of-pocket cost.
Yeah. All right, folks. Well, we're going to continue with you, Dr. Hermann. Folks, we're on with Dr. Bruce Hermann, board-certified plastic surgeon. He hosts a program called Nip Talk, which I think is a really clever name. And we're going to continue our discussion on America's obsession with youthfulness when we return. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So, scientists at Harvard University claim to have come very close to finding the proverbial fountain of youth. According to a recent publication in the scientific journal Aging, the team has identified 6 chemical concoctions that have the ability to reverse the aging process in both human and mice skin cells. A molecular biologist at Harvard Medical School and co-author of the study has hailed this as a quote-unquote breakthrough and sees it as a step towards affordable whole-body rejuvenation. Now, our guest, Dr. Bruce Hermann, board-certified plastic surgeon. Doc, what do you think of this?
Well, it's interesting when you were talking about that study. I'm not familiar with that particular study, so I would be really curious to hear what their thoughts are on things that can prevent aging. Now, I can tell you about a couple things that I know can prevent aging for your listeners who maybe are not ready to dive into Botox or other procedures or surgery to stay youthful.
Right.
It was just a big hubbub on social media when Gwyneth Paltrow posted a picture of her on vacation, and people were kind of taken aback that her skin really showed some advanced signs of aging. And of course, that was a big topic and something that we talked about on my last show last week. And it was mostly due to sun exposure. And so when people think about, okay, what are some things I can do to prevent myself from premature aging? Probably the number one factor is not to get any excess ultraviolet light, whether it be from sun or tanning beds. That's one of the things that I see that will age your skin
So you
faster
said
than
stay out of
anything.
the sun and stay out of the tanning booth.
Yeah, ultraviolet light is really, really bad for your skin. It ages it very quickly.
Now, I love
it
being
gives
in
you-
the sun. I'm like a convertible
and
lover.
I do too.
So let me ask you, if I'm going to do that, what do you recommend I do? Like a ton of sunscreen, a bunch of lotion, or no?
Yeah, absolutely. Sunscreen is absolutely your best bet. You want to use a sunscreen, preferably a waterproof one. Apply it every couple hours. If you do that, you can stay out in the sun as much as you want, and your skin will be protected from that harmful ultraviolet radiation that ages it. So,
We're talking about both preventing like melanoma, skin cancer, as well as like premature
As
wrinkles.
aging. Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the big things that causes skin cancer is lifetime accumulation of ultraviolet light exposure. So, fortunately, skin cancer is very treatable, but obviously, if we don't have to have skin cancer, that's always the better. So, staying out of the sun or protecting yourself from the sun with good sunscreen or shade is very important to prevent that aging process and overall keep yourself healthy.
Yeah, fascinating. So, I know you don't know this study, but it's it seems skeptical to me, right? I'm really curious as to are they going to mix 6 different things together and come up with a fountain of youth pill? It seems very, very like a long shot to me. What's
They'll
the
be very
closest
rich
thing
if they do.
Yeah, I've heard some people say that different endocrine things like hormone replacements and things like that can act as a deterrent to aging. I don't know how accurate that is. What's your thought?
Well, definitely as we age, our hormones start to shift and we start to see decreases in the natural androgynous hormones like testosterone in men and estrogen in women. And that does have an effect. It starts to slow down our metabolism. We see that it's actually much harder to keep weight off and overall make you have less energy. So, yeah, there is some truth to the fact that our natural hormones do start to wane as we age, and supplementing that can potentially make you feel more youthful and potentially look more youthful. So I'm not somebody who goes around recommending hormones to my patients, but there is truth to that science.
All right. Well, we're going to continue this conversation and wrap it up with Dr. Hermann on the other side of this break. I want to give you the phone number. It's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And, of course, Open Phone America starts at the top of the next hour, so you can start getting your calls in on that, on every topic we've discussed tonight, whether it's the hearings on censorship and the weaponization of government, our conversation on the hacking and incompetence of some of our government workers and not protecting our critical cyber infrastructure, as well as the fascination and obsession with youthfulness that we're discussing right now with Dr. Hermann, plus all of your comments and thoughts as well. 833-482-5337, 8334-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America. Now, listen, I know a lot of you are thinking, I don't give a crap. And some of you might be telling the truth. Some of you might be lying. But I'm looking at this article here. Listen, and this is from UPI. Chronic constipation may indicate higher risk for dementia. Now, I'm coupling this with another article, Washington Post. Hearing aids may cut risk of cognitive decline by nearly half. A large study showed that older adults with a higher risk of dementia may be able to reduce their risk of cognitive decline by almost 50% by using hearing aids. So, if you are like our president, Joe El Baboso Biden, who's had quite a bit of nip tuck, I must say, and you can't poop and you can't hear, well, you're on your way to losing it. Doc, have you heard any of these?
Well, I hadn't heard the one about the constipation. I do believe the study about the hearing aids, because one thing that I know does decrease the risk of dementia as we get older is keeping your mind sharp and keeping it active. And I could totally see how somebody who was not able to hear would be engaging less with outside stimuli, whether that be people or, anything really. And so if you don't use it, you lose it. And so I think being able to hear would definitely keep people being sharper. So I could see that study is very accurate.
Yeah. All right. Well,
the
we're going to delve into
I can't
that.
speak about.
That's fair. We'll jump into it. But I'll get lots of opinions from WebMDs like me in the next hour. But I wanted to let everybody know how they could keep up to speed with the work that you're doing, and if they wanted to tune into your program and whatnot, let everybody know.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is a big, important thing to me to keep people educated. And so I did that first on social media, things like TikTok and Instagram, and I took it to the next level of actually 1 year ago tomorrow and started my own video podcast about plastic surgery, health, and medicine.
Cool.
You can
Happy
see that
anniversary.
on YouTube.
Give them the address really quick before they cut us off.
It's at Nip Talk Show on YouTube, and we talk about topics like this every week.
Perfect. Dr. Hermann, thank you, sir. Folks, at Nip Talk Show, check that out on TikTok and on Instagram. And stick with me right here. Open Phone America starts right now. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media, your liberty-loving Latino amigo, and I'm happy to be here with you. Thursday night edition. Welcome to the program. If you want to join our late-night national town hall conversation, feel free to give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And the hearing on censorship today, hosted by the United States House of Representatives Committee on the Weaponization of Government, chaired by Jim Jordan, was a really interesting place to be. I mean, the Democrats went after the Democrat witness, right? And again, the witness being the son of Bobby Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a prominent Kennedy family member that's running for president, but they don't like his position on a lot of things. And again, this guy is a liberal, right? It's not like he's talking about cutting taxes and being pro-life or anything. He's not a conservative, but he tends to not like the current vaccines that are available. He's been vaccinated. His children have been vaccinated. He claims he's not anti-vax, but that he doesn't like the COVID vaccine and some others that he's taken exception to. And there's others in Hollywood that have taken similar positions. And my point is that he's been ostracized by the Democrat Party. I mean, one Democrat congressman, what's his name, Gerald Connolly, today he says that RFK Jr. brings shame to the Kennedy name. Listen to this.
There's an opportunity to have a conspiracy theory here. There's an opportunity to make political points. And no matter what you may think, Mr. Kennedy, and I revere your name, you're not here to propound your case for censorship. You are here for cynical reasons to be used politically by that side of the aisle to embarrass the current president of the United States, and you're an enabler in that effort today. And it brings shame on a storied name that I revere. I began my political interest with your father, and it makes me profoundly sad to see where we have descended today in this hearing.
You know, this is so funny. How dare you play politics when you're running for president to try to embarrass Joe Biden, your opponent in the primary? Now, listen, it's not like Bobby Kennedy, or excuse me, RFK Jr. is in the White House. It's not like he is the attorney general. It's not like he's doing anything to politicize or weaponize his governmental authority to go after Joe Biden. All he's doing is leveraging his celebrity, leveraging his name recognition to lend, some voice to his platform because he's running for president. Now, I'm sure people say, "Oh, don't waste your time. You don't have a shot." Well, I'm sure he thinks otherwise. And it's just interesting how they just that was one angle, right? That was one angle that they took where they said, "Oh my gosh, you bring shame to a name that I revere. How dare you call yourself a Kennedy? Ay bendito," right? Unbelievable the way they whine and the belly aching. But that doesn't stop there. Then you've got Representative Stacey Plaskett. And listen, I am a closet fan of hers. I think that she's very effective. I think she's very well spoken. I think she's very convincing. I don't agree with what she says, and I don't like what she says. But it almost angers me to the point where I'm like, man, you got that one. Where I feel like, she can really fool a bunch of people because she's just sharp and she makes a convincing argument, at least, initially. She could sit there and tell you that the world's going to last for another 10 days or, like AOC, you got 12 years left, that type of thing. But in a way where you're like, maybe she's got a point there. Anyway, Representative Plaskett, at the censorship hearing today, says that free speech is not absolute. And, they want to cite the Supreme Court in order to do that. Of course, the fighting words doctrine is a real thing. That's not free speech. You don't have the right to free speech to say, hey, I'm going to beat the crap out of you. That's not your free speech. It's not. That's a threat. And it falls under the fighting words doctrine. You can't say, hey, the infamous proverbial example of yelling fire in a crowded theater, which isn't even in the that case. But again, that's the example that's used quite often. And again, that's nothing to do with RFK Jr. speaking his mind on an issue that he's been very vocal about and he's written about extensively. So I mean, again, I don't agree with him on everything either. I disagree with him on most things. But I don't think we could say that his free speech is not absolute, because there was nothing he was saying that even remotely touched the areas of the fighting words doctrine. Listen to Representative Plaskett.
Now, many of my Republican colleagues across the dais will rush to cover that they have Mr. Kennedy here because they want to protect his free speech, that they do not believe in American censorship. This is not the kind of free speech that I know of, the free speech that is protected by the Constitution's First Amendment. But free speech is not an absolute. The Supreme Court has stated that. And others' free speech that is allowed, hateful, abusive rhetoric, does not need to be promoted in the halls of the people's house.
Now, this is where I take exception to what Representative Plaskett is saying, because Mr. Kennedy decides to say that he believes China created a bioweapon, she's calling that Asian hate. And because of, and I honestly don't remember the context of the other, I think it had something to do with other ethnicities being targeted for extermination. And she's saying that now is anti-Semitism coming from Mr. Kennedy. And again, it was from what I could see, that was not the case. And he goes on and he makes a case for himself where he's clear that he's never been a racist or an anti-Semite. This is clip number 7. Listen to RFK Jr. at the hearing today in his own defense.
By the way, I want to say this while I'm on the record, that in my entire life, and why I'm under oath, in my entire life, I have never uttered a phrase that was either racist or anti-Semitic. I have spent my life fighting my professional career, fighting for Israel, for the protection of Israel. I have a better record on Israel than anybody in this chamber today. I'm the only person who has publicly objected to the $2 billion payout that the Biden administration is now making to Iran, which is a genocidal program. I'm the only one who's objected to that. I fought more ferociously for Israel than anybody. But I am being censored here through this target, through smears, through misinterpretations of what I've said, through lies, through association, which is a tactic that we all thought we had been discredited and dispensed with after the Army McCarthy hearings in the 1950s. But those same weapons are now being deployed against me to silence me. I know many of the people who wrote this letter. I don't believe there's a single person who signed this letter who believes I'm anti-Semitic. I do not believe that. There is no evidence of that.
And he goes on and he talks about the letter, and if we have time, I'll play the rest of it. But I wanted you to hear him defending himself, because, again, the Democrats didn't want him to even say what he's saying. They said he shouldn't have a platform in the halls of Congress, that he could be outside, he could go anywhere he wants, but he didn't have to have an audience of the House of Representatives in order to defend himself. When it was them, Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Stacey Plaskett and others, that were maligning him, in my opinion, right? If I say something like there are individuals, Asian individuals in New York City that are being pushed into the subway tracks, does that mean that I'm now discriminating against Asians because I'm making a matter-of-fact statement, which is true? Come on. I mean, you've got to be kidding me. Anyway, let us go here. Where did we go? There was somebody that had a comment on this, and I wanted to go with them. Scott, Charleston, South Carolina, WTMA. Scott, you're on with Rich Valdez. Welcome.
Hey, Rich. Thank you for taking my call. I wanted to focus on Debbie Wasserman Schultz's comments. Mm-hmm. Now, I believe she described earlier this week, Kennedy cited some medical research, and I believe she referred to his comments as vile and despicable. And of course, I disagree with her on that, but if they were vile and despicable, do you go on to repeat them to a audience 100 times bigger than the original audience? And isn't repeating them equivalent to like retweeting something?
Right, just as vile and despicable.
Yeah, people are gone after 5 years later because they retweeted something innocuous, and now they're being publicly accused of things. But yeah, I mean, if something, you don't repeat a vile and despicable idea, or it's like, that Mrs. Jones is such a gossip. You won't believe what she said about Mrs. Wilson, and then repeating what she said about Mrs. Wilson.
Right, 100%. No, it makes a lot of sense, Scott. I think you're hitting the nail on the head. She did, and so did Plaskett. I mean, and again, like I said, I happened to be. I watched the whole thing, beginning to end, and I was just shocked at how some of the comments that Stacey Plaskett made before even Debbie Wasserman Schultz had a chance to make those comments. She was saying that RFK Jr. was making these statements on behalf of white supremacy, and that he was bullying the media and technology companies. And I thought, how is one man going to bully these huge companies that clearly have bullied the entire American populace for years on end, until one of them was bought by Elon Musk and took the boot off our throat a little bit. I mean, it's just the stuff that they come up with is just so imaginative, I guess is the word I'm going to use. But Scott, thank you for your call. I appreciate it. Big shout out to everybody in South Carolina on WTMA, great station. And folks, I want to remind you that you can vote for our podcast. We've been nominated. Rich Valdez, America at Night, the podcast of this program, was nominated for a People's Choice Podcast Award. And you can register and verify your email. You have to prove who you are in order to vote. We were nominated for a category called Government and Organizations category for our coverage of governments and organizations. And you can cast your vote at podcastawards.com. Put my name in there, Rich Valdez, and then you have to confirm your email. Click on the link that they send you once you confirm it, and you can go ahead and cast your vote absolutely free under the Government and Organizations column. So make sure you do that. Rich Valdez, America at Night. I'm looking forward for you guys supporting me on this one. If you can, I'd appreciate it. And we're going to get to the rest of your calls straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Valdez, who again will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to it.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
This is a letter that many of you signed, many of my fellow Democrats. I've spent my life in this party. I've devoted my life to the values of this party. There's 102 people signed this. This itself is evidence of the problem that this hearing was convened to address. This is an attempt to censor a censorship hearing. The charges in this, and by the way, censorship is antithetical to our party. It was appalling to my father, to my uncle, to FDR, to Harry Truman, to Thomas Jefferson, as the chairman referred to. It is the basis for democracy. It sets us apart from all of the previous forms of government. We need to be able to talk, and the First Amendment was not written for easy speech. It was written for the speech that nobody likes you for.
That's, again, RFK Jr. in his appeal to Democrats here, defending himself after they just demonized him for, I don't know, just being who he was. And I want to get your thoughts on this. Let's go to Oshkosh, Wisconsin, KFIZ, KFIZ, another great station. Let's check in with Holden. Holden, you're on with Rich Valdez. Welcome. Go right ahead.
Hey, the last time I talked with you, it was about what movie had the best quote. And it was back the winter months.
Oh,
and
cool.
I had said The Great Perdition.
And what do you think about RFK,
anyway,
Holden?
RFK Jr. should not be running. He's not his dad. And that goes back to that final quote in the movie of Road Perdition. He's trying to be somebody that he isn't. He shouldn't even be running for president.
Why not? You think he's not effective at it?
Trust him? Exactly. I don't think he can be an effective leader. I don't think he can stand forth and upright and speak to the world. I don't trust him with the way that he is. He seems like he's a frail type guy, just by the way that he talks. And
well, he has an ailment that makes him talk that way. But I understand what you're saying. I mean, I've been waiting for a couple of decades now for a Democrat that really gives me that gravitas, that appeal where I'm like, I'm going to vote for that guy. That's the guy we need for president. And it's never happened to me. I've never found a Democrat that I thought, man, this guy would make a great president. And I wasn't, I think Bill Clinton was, I turned 18 while he was in office, so I couldn't vote back then. And again, I don't know if I would have voted for him or not, but he was a good president on the economy. Now, Holden, who do you think should be president? Who are you putting your support behind?
I'm a Republican. I'm very conservative. I appreciate what God's given. However, if we're looking on that route, Trump, I think, the
well, just tell me who you think, because we're going to run out of time.
I would go for Trump over the sanctimonious.
All right. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Holden, calling from Oshkosh, Wisconsin, KFIZ, KFIZ, KFizzle, Monizzle. All right, folks, we're going to come back to your calls and more. Plus, I've been teasing these articles for days about how chronic constipation can lead to dementia, and hearing aids can help you prevent dementia. Don't go anywhere. Rich Valdez.
Oh, my liberty-loving Latino.
America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
A lot of my friends in organized labor know when I think climate, I think jobs. I think union jobs, not a joke.
That's Joe Biden promoting Bidenomics. And he said, it's not a joke. Yeah, I think Joe Biden is a joke. That's just my opinion. But I'm going to tell you what's not a joke. This article that I shared with you before, and we're going to get to the rest of your calls momentarily on whatever topic you want. So just hang with me. But what I wanted to talk about was how older adults are at greater risk for dementia, and they may be able to protect themselves against cognitive decline by using hearing aids. And this is according to new research. Now, we were on with Dr. Hermann earlier, and he mentioned that he felt it was because the mental acuity is engaged, right? And you're a lot more dull if you can't hear. That makes a lot of sense. But this was a study published on Monday in Lancet, and it found that the use of hearing aids can reduce the risk of cognitive decline by about half, 48% for adults with risk factors for dementia. Now, of course, Lancet is the same. It's the same medical journal that was incredibly wrong on just about everything related to COVID early on. So take that with a grain of salt, and maybe we'll get into that. I'll tweet it out so that you guys can take a look at it, at Rich Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of these social media. And that ties into this other one. Listen, these are real headlines here. Listen to this. Chronic constipation may indicate higher risk for dementia. So if you're constipated, you have higher risk for dementia, and you can cut that risk in half by getting a hearing aid. Now, that won't help you poop, but at least you'll be able to hear better, if that makes sense. All right. We continue with your calls. Let's see. Where were we going here? Let's go to John. He's in Cleveland, Ohio on KDKA, listening online. Go right ahead, John.
Hello. I'd like to recommend a search phrase that I made up out of my own mind that has produced a plethora, I think, of mind-boggling information. It's called CIA controls media to demonize countries for U.S. attacks against them. And I think this is one of the dirty little secrets, that the media in this country is really a cause of most of our problems. And whether one is a supporter of Democrats or Republicans, I think they're both controlled by that same military-industrial CIA media complex. And that is symptomatic of the attacks on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The fact that he has attacked these wars abroad and having over 900 military bases in other people's countries around the world, whereas Russia and China have one or two, yet they're constantly portrayed as this demonic aggressor out for conquest of the world.
Well,
never mind.
I'm going to say, John, just because they don't have bases everywhere doesn't make Putin and Xi or Russia and China any better on the scale of being bad guys. But if the case that you're making is that the United States is a bad guy, or perhaps even a bigger bad guy, that's maybe entirely true. I kind of liken it to like my brother, right? Not everybody likes one of my brothers in particular. Not everybody likes him. They meet him and they go, man, you guys are related? How is that possible? He's such a this, he's such a that. But, I mean, ultimately, I'm a very even-tempered guy. I'm a nice guy. Yeah, I like to have a good time. I love to joke around. But my brother's not exactly like that all the time. And ultimately what happens is if he gets into a fight, what do you think happens? We're both going to get into the fight, right? So even if the bad guys are in our government, what am I going to do? Start hating America? It's just not in the cards for me. I'm not going to hate America. Captain goes down with the ship, right? So, if there's going to be a bad guy that I'm in for, it's going to be my bad guy, the United States. Thanks for your call, John. I appreciate it. Let's continue. Let's go to Don. Don is in Reading, Pennsylvania, WEEU. Don, go right ahead. Welcome.
Hi, Rich.
Hey.
Hey, listen, I'm a long-time listener of talk radio. I'm 68 years old. I don't know if you remember Larry Glick. You probably don't because you're too young.
Yeah.
But he's out of WBZ in Boston. And, I've been listening to talk radio all my life. And I really appreciate you taking over for Jim Bohannon. I'm going to tell you what. I'm going to tell you what. You're doing a hell of a job. You're a good man. We need more people like you on this earth, you know it?
Oh, God bless you, Don. I appreciate that. That's very kind of you. And the check is in the mail, pal. Don in Reading, Pennsylvania. Thank you, my man. I really do appreciate it. Let us continue. Thanks for tuning in. Means a lot. Let's continue. Where are we going here? Let's go to John now. Yeah, John, Don. Now we're back to John. Let's go to John in Oil City, Pennsylvania, WFRA. John, you're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
Well, good evening there, Rich. Good to speak with you.
Hello. Buenos dias.
Yes, sir. Well, I initially want to call and talk to you about the movie The Sound of Freedom, but I did want to back up to what the other guy said about RFK Jr. not running. I think it's a good thing being in the sake of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I agree with that, too. I'm not voting for him, but I think it's great that he's in the race.
Yeah, I think they need a little guy there to kind of give Biden a little push to take the. They need like a renegade in there on the Democrat side because there's too many of them in there that just drank the blue Kool-Aid too much, I think.
No, I think you're right. Listen, I for many reasons. One, because I really do believe in the free market, even when it comes to ideas, right? I believe in the free marketplace of ideas. If we have enough discussion, somebody's going to walk away from our discussion going, you know, that guy did better than that guy. That guy's smarter than that guy. I like that guy's ideas better than that guy. Right. And I think that's a good thing for all of us, for my children, for your children, for our neighbors, for our enemies, for our friends. Everybody wins when we have this type of discourse. I believe that to be true. The other part of it is, I talk about this stuff on the radio every day. Why not have a guy like RFK Jr. in the race, right? He's a Kennedy running as a Democrat. He's a Democrat. You know, they're synonymous with Democrats. So the fact that, you know, he gets this horrible reception today and they tell him he's a shill for Republicans and he's just there to embarrass Joe Biden, I thought it was just so rich that, you know, there's zero loyalty in Washington, zero loyalty with his friends on the left. And I thought that was pretty telling, John.
Exactly. It's the same thing they do. They do the distraction thing. They throw in their words. They try to say, well, you said this when he didn't. They try to distract you into what they're trying to make you think he said when he didn't. And I like the way he backed them up and said, look, this is what I said. I'm on oath. I'm going to say this under oath. So you guys hear me right, you know.
Right, and he's on the record.
Exactly. So and that's a Democratic tactic that they use. In distraction, we're going to not tell you what we're going to say. We're going to make you turn over here and listen to something else. And that's just a blue kind of thing they do.
Yeah, good point, John. I appreciate it. Thank you for your call from Oil City, Pennsylvania, WFRA. And, you know, if the Dems have their way, there won't be any oil in Oil City, Pennsylvania, because they're coming after the fossil fuels. Thank you, John. I appreciate it. Let's continue with Linda, Albany, New York, WGDJ. Linda, go right ahead.
Well, thank you for taking my call and congratulations.
Thank you.
And I've got two things, actually. The first that I mentioned was the way the Democrats treated both Mr. Kennedy and the whistleblowers. It's a good thing we need term limits, very much so, and how anybody can be voting for those rude, crude people. But with the person you were just talking to, it's making me think, I wonder why there's never been any great grandchildren of Washington or Lincoln or any of the early people that have gotten interested in politics.
Yeah, well, you know, early on there were, right, like the Adamses and even who was it? Hoover. She's in, you know, sort of in politics. Margaret Hoover. She's from Herbert Hoover. There's a few people out there, but you're right. They're not all in elected office. And honestly, I think people frown upon it nowadays. You know, you had the Bush dynasty, and I think people were very upset with that. As much as they like Jeb, a lot of people like Jeb, and I like Jeb. I think he was great on education policy. He was a decent governor in Florida. I thought Jeb was a good candidate until I saw him, you know, get his lunch and his shorts handed to him by a guy named Donald Trump. Donaldus Magnus, El Trumpito, the 45th president of these United States, El Presidente. He really, really, separated the men from the boys in his debate back in 2016. And for me, that was the deciding factor for me. I said, I love Ted Cruz. I like Marco Rubio too. But once I saw what happened there, I said, you know what? This is the guy. This is the guy who means business. And some people don't like that. That was all I needed for me. Call me shallow. Call me whatever you want. Or just call me, 833-482-5337. We'll be right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
so glad to be on your show, Rich. It's just an amazing broadcast that I hope the rest of America listens to every day.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Go to James in Toledo, Ohio, WBBR. James, welcome. You're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead. James, I scared him with this beautifully coiffed head of hair that I have. All right, don't worry about it. We're going to go to Tom. Tom's in Trenton, New Jersey on WDEL. Tom, go right ahead.
Hi, how are you? You are definitely the best there is in the industry. But you were talking about the news media. Can you remember a story out of Norfolk, Virginia, I think it was, where there was a man and women. They were a Christian couple. They were white, and they were the anchors.
I don't know a lot of white Christian couples that are in the news right now, other than the folks that were in that case. What was it, 301 Creative, the Supreme Court case. So I can't say that I do. But what I can say is that, and I follow the New Jersey news pretty closely. I think it's kind of crazy that you have the governor pushing the attorney general, right, state attorney general in New Jersey, to go after, I think it's 3 different school boards, because they collectively, in each of those towns, passed a school board regulation through the school board, because the parents were up in arms, saying that if a child wanted to transition, that they had to notify the parents of said transition. And the state took exception to this and said, no, we're not going to do that. And it was, some of them were Christian parents, others were not, but it wasn't on the basis of religion. It was on the basis of parental rights, and the parents feeling like they were being cut out of the picture, where the minor child, their minor child, who they have custody of, was dealing directly with the school and cutting the parent out of the equation. So I find it egregious that Governor Murphy is really that invested in going against parents, that after they lobby and get these regulations, these school board regulations approved, that he would use the instrumentality of the Attorney General's office to, as the state's top law enforcer, to go after parents. I just think it's like literally stealing a playbook from Joe Biden and what he's done in Washington. And if that's not the weaponization of government, I don't know what is. But thank you, Tom, for your call. Trenton, New Jersey in the building, WDEL. Thank you. Let's see. Where do we go from here? We're going to, let's keep it on the East Coast. Let's go to Alex. He's in Brooklyn, New York on WFAS. Alex, go right ahead.
Hey, thanks so much for taking the call. I wanted to comment about RFK and his testimony that he gave today, because the way I felt about it is the reaction from the Democrats was so interesting, because yesterday you had the whistleblower coming out with dirt. And none of the Democratic politicians, as offended as they were that the whistleblowers were there, then they didn't say you got to shut the witnesses and the whistleblowers up. But with RFK, when he was talking about the vaccine, they were like, oh, we got to censor him. We got to shut him up. And he, if you think about it, he was the first person to be censored by the whole movement. With Hillary Clinton, with the email scandal in 2016, they never reached out to big tech that you got to censor people to talk about it. But now, once they started with vaccine, where you got to censor RFK, that opened the door to the politicians to then with the...
It looks like they're trying to censor you too, Alex. You're chopping in and out, but I get the point. And you're saying that, once you brought vaccines to the mix, all of a sudden they're up in arms. And you're right. And that's because so many politicians overall are sold out to big pharma. They're sold out to many different companies. And this is not just Democrats. There's Republicans in this in that boat as well. But it's you can always see how their response is when they let one thing go and then they don't let the other thing go. Somebody has paid them, usually quite handsomely, to take that kind of action. Alex, I appreciate it. I wanted to go to Dallas in Brooklyn, New York. Looks like he's gone as well. Well, we're going to hit this break. We'll come back. Got the rest of your calls coming up. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right. This is the speed round. We're going to get as many as we can. Let's go. We're going to go to Cleveland, Ohio, WEOL. Steve, go right ahead quickly.
Hey, Rich. Hey, real quick. Easy listening in the night. Robert Kennedy Jr. is the old Democratic Party. We got a Dennis Menace and Lucy Brown over there, Charlie Brown, Paulina Luna. But these people, the Bible says is what later on, like what is right is wrong, and I'll tell you what's wrong is right. But the bottom line is Trump knew
what's
what
up
was
is
going
down,
on,
and what's down is up, right? These guys are all over the place. But it seems like the old Dems are like Kennedy, and the new Dems can't get out of their own way, just complaining. Thanks, Steve. Let's go. Michael, Pendleton, Oregon, KUMA. Go right ahead.
Hey, Rich. Your friend Michael here. Sorry I couldn't call last night. It was my birthday, so we were having
Happy birthday, Michael. God bless you, my brother.
Thank you. I'll try to be quicker. I speak about Ukraine. The reason, explaining to the listeners why I have that interest, my girlfriend of 3 years lives there. And like I said, I don't wish the Russians anything bad, the Russian people, but I'm concerned about my girlfriend and Ukraine people. So there was
listen, anybody in their right mind wants that conflict to come to an end. Right, we don't want it to continue. Now, there are some people that want it to continue because they maybe profit from it or they think it's right. But, we'll probably dedicate a little more time to this tomorrow so that we could kind of really get into this because I'd like to get your take on it. So let's Count Delacula. Make sure you remember that we want to get Michael from Pendleton, Oregon on tomorrow to go in depth on Ukraine. Michael, thanks for the call, brother. I don't mean to cut you off, but the music's about to kick in, and they're going to kick us all out of here. And let's talk about serious matters here with Paul in Zanesville, Ohio, WSOY. Go right ahead.
Speed round. Okay, Rich. My grandmother loved John F. Kennedy, and I believe it was because she thought that he prevented the Third World War. And also on constipation and not being able to hear. Yeah, when you get my age, Rich, you get a little more constipated. Politics don't help. And then with the hearing aids, I do believe that's a good thing because if you're not informed and don't listen to shows like the Rich Valdez show, well, then you're really not informed. You're listening to a bunch of
and then you're full of crap.
And all that.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. Big shout out to WSOY. And I want to give a shout out to James in Toledo, Ohio on WBER. Thank you, James, for the call. Sorry we couldn't get to you. Frank in Evergreen, Montana, KOFI. Big shout out to you. Take care, good night, and God bless. Hasta la próxima. Until the next time, I am Rich Valdez. We'll do it all again tomorrow.